Why do I look like Sam Collins with my hair messed up like this? And why do I love it? Hey, what's up you guys? My name is zeanderthal, and today I'm going to be reacting to a YouTube video by the channel Girl Defined. If you have never heard of the YouTube channel Girl Defined, then you probably haven't been watching LGBT YouTubers in the last 6 months to a year. I've seen many LGBT YouTubers react to this channel and specifically this video, and I thought I might have a unique perspective sharing my thoughts on this video because I am transgender and I am Christian, and I spend a lot of time in both Christian circles and LGBT circles.
Today we're going to be talking about just a really light, mild topic. We're going to be talking about the topic of gender, and today's video we're going to...
Alright, right off the bat, girl on the left, scared out of her mind. Girl on the right is describing gender as if it were a salsa, so...
So several months ago, I was talking to a little girl. She was only maybe 9 or 10 years old. This little girl grew up in a Christian church, a Christian home. She came from a solid upbringing, but because of the questions and pressures that culture was placing on her, she was having to ask some really big questions. So I remember her big eyes looking up at me, and she was asking me about the topic of gender.
There's a lot going on here. So what this story of her talking to this little girl gave me, what I got from that, is that, from my understanding, they're not setting out to change the minds of trans people or even people who already support trans people. They're not coming out and saying like, hey, you know how you support trans rights? You shouldn't do that anymore. I think the audience that this video and these types of videos are targeted at are Christians who are either on the fundamental side or the traditional side of Christianity, and they're sort of on the fence about topics like homosexuality and the trans experience, because she presents this idea of a child questioning the norms of being intolerant to trans and gay people as this like far-fetched idea.
Someone for themselves be able to say, well, I feel this way. I feel, if I'm a girl, but I feel like a boy, can I choose to be a boy? And I was saying, explaining to her what the Bible said and as Christians, what our perspective should be.
There's a lot going on here. So first she said she was explaining to the girl what the Bible said. And I think for a child growing up in a religious environment, and for anyone that takes God's word as like the final answer, that is a great way to explain this topic or any topic. The problem that I have is she said she explained as Christians what our perspective should be. Now, if she said this to anyone, I would have a problem with it. The reason I especially have a problem with it here is because she's telling this little girl, this child, as a Christian, what her perspective should be. So she's not saying, this is how I feel and this is how some Christians feel. She's saying, as a Christian, this is what you should feel, which sort of invalidates all of the girl's opinions that she expressed. She said, I'm just not sure that we should be intolerant to trans people. I'm just not sure if we shouldn't accept gay people. And what this young woman making this video is saying to this little girl is, well, as a Christian, this is what your perspective should be. And that is so wrong on so many levels that I almost can't explain the depth of manipulation and Christian guilt that is being put on this child. So the title of this video is Gender a Personal Choice? I'm not going to speak on the behalf of the entire trans community, but from where I'm standing, gender is not a personal choice, and that's why I transitioned. Honestly, if gender was a personal choice, I would have chosen a long time ago to be a girl. I didn't transition because I thought it would be fun, or because society, conditioned my brain to decide to be male. I didn't wake up one day and say, you know what? I really want some male privilege, so I'm just gonna become a man. If gender was a personal choice, we probably would have less trans people. Honestly.
So I just remember hearing her talk about that and realizing, wow, we as Christians need to answer this question, is gender a personal choice? Because this is something we're facing today in our very own cities right now.
Our very own cities right now. We have trans people in our own cities. I know there's some in mine. Here's the thing. Most trans people I know, I would say every single trans person that I know, they're not transitioning as a whim. They're not changing their gender markers and their name and their pronouns and having surgery and injecting themselves with hormones because in the moment they feel masculine, or in the moment they feel feminine, or in the moment they don't identify with gender norms. What this young woman is getting to is that trans people are acting on impulse, and I just don't see that. And I think sometimes with people picking different names online or being open about their questioning of their gender, it can seem to people outside of this community like the trans community is, just taking something and running with it. But what I've seen with the vast majority of trans people that I've met personally, their own gender identity is something that they come to after a long process of questioning themselves or a long process of struggle in the gender they were assigned at birth. One thing I want to say about the entire Girl Defined channel, and beyond that, channels and people sharing this type of rhetoric, is I think there are equally extreme voices on either side of this conversation. I have been in many Christian circles and I have been in many LGBT circles, and I've openly expressed on my channel before that I think that you can easily find Christian voices out there spewing intolerance and closed-mindedness towards LGBT people specifically. The problem I have with critics of these channels is they typically don't address the fact that you can just as easily find intolerance and closed-mindedness specifically targeted towards people of faith within LGBT communities. I think what happens for a lot of people is they get burned or they get hurt by religious or spiritual communities. And so part of them never fully heals from that burn, from being hurt by that community. And so they ostracize people within that community the same way that they were ostracized. Or they spew hate towards those people the same way that hate was spewed towards them. And I think a lot of people have written off Girl Defined specifically, and channels just like them, by saying they're transphobic, they're bigots, they're haters, without questioning, where does that perspective come from? Why are they like this? Why are they sharing this? Who is this directed towards? When I watch Girl Defined, it is blatantly clear to me that they just don't understand the trans experience at all. I have been in a handful of spaces that I can think of off the top of my head wherein there were young women of faith who had these stereotypical ideas of what trans people were, and they just took that stereotype and extrapolated it to define the entire transgender community. This channel specifically talks about women or girls defined by Christ, girls defined by God, meaning these girls' identities are defined by Christ. And to me, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I might be biased because I'm Christian, but to me, that alone, there's no problem with that. What there is a problem with is defining transgender people's identity completely by a stereotype. And so what they're doing is giving the authority of their identity to the Lord and saying everything that I feel is right for me came from the Lord, but everything that this trans person feels is right for them came from society, or it came from Tumblr, or it came from these social justice warriors. And I think that the argument that there isn't any LGBT people of faith, I don't even want to say it's outdated. There's no basis for that. And I think that there's room for gender diversity and diversity of all kinds in every world religion. And what people sort of gloss over, the vast majority of religions are literally based in diversity. Okay, let's watch some more of this.
So if you're saying, yeah, I believe gender is a personal choice, I can become a guy, I can become a girl, I can go back and forth, I can do whatever feels good in the moment, well, then your authority is based on your feelings. Or maybe your authority is based on the culture. So whatever the cultural flow is, the culture says, yeah, it's totally okay to change your gender. It's totally okay to redefine your gender according to what you feel like. Then you might say, yeah, that's my authority source. And so sure, I believe that's okay. That sounds good to me.
The biggest question I have for these young women is, what do you say to trans people who follow Christ, who have put hours and hours and hours into praying and talking to God specifically about their gender identity, and have come to the conclusion with the highest authority of the universe, God that they are transgender, and to live authentically, they have to transition. Like I said, it is blatantly obvious to me that these girls just don't understand the trans experience. It is also blatantly obvious to me that the critics of this channel, I'm talking about the big names, like I don't want to call anyone out, but the big names within the trans community who have made videos responding to these girls, it is blatantly obvious to me that they also don't understand this perspective. I've seen so many people put themselves sort of on a pedestal and have this like holier than thou mentality, and that's exactly what these girls are doing. And that's exactly what our community has a problem with. And so people come on and they say, it is so problematic that these girls come on and say that they're better than us. The problem I have with discussions like this is both sides of the conversation are just as bad as the other side. It's so easy from a trans perspective to say, oh, these girls are just all into pastels and they got all their ideas off Pinterest. It is just as easy for the other side to say, oh, these gender benders are just into dyeing their hair and they got all their ideas off Tumblr. And I think neither side sees the irony of hating the other side. I've witnessed a lot of Christian rhetoric that goes, oh, we're accepting of all people, we love all people, Jesus loves all people, except X, Y, and Z. And I've also seen a lot of LGBT circles that say, we're accepting of all people, we love all people, pride is for all people, except X, Y, and Z. And I think that controversial conversations like this one, there's something that needs to be had, for sure. But I think we come to a roadblock when anyone in the conversation stops and says, my perspective is the only perspective that's right, and I am not open to understanding the other perspective. I wanted to make this video to challenge my audience, no matter what side of this conversation you're on or where you stand on these conversations. I just want to challenge you to look at the other perspective. What I like to do, especially when the conversation is about something political or something that directly targets a demographic that I'm a part of, is try to put myself in a situation where I would come to the same conclusion as the other side. Obviously, I accept trans people. That's the stance that I take on conversations like this. And so the challenge that I'm faced with is putting myself in a situation where my consciousness, like my personality, the core of who I am, would agree with the girls in this video. Now, this might be something that's a few steps away for some people, but I think misunderstanding is something that is so easy to alleviate. Whether you misunderstand a religion or an ideology or a rhetoric or a person's view, it is so easy to alleviate that misunderstanding by just taking time to empathize with that person or taking time to really research the ideology. I really wish that I could sit down for brunch or for coffee with these young women and talk to them about my young trans Christian experience and listen to them talk about their young cisgender Christian experience and just share our perspectives on life and on gender and on faith. Unfortunately, I don't think that's gonna happen. So all I can do as someone who works every day to expand his consciousness is watch their videos and try to empathize with anything that they say. And that's what I challenge you with. You can call this the Girl Defined Challenge. Watch one of their videos and try to empathize with anything that they say. Find a sentence that they say that you either agree with, or you can create a story in your mind where you would have life experiences that would lead you to that same conclusion. Because that's how we love each other. That's how we accept each other. That's how we get along and tolerate each other's differences and diversity. I know this video wasn't the typical kind of video that I post, but I really hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, make sure to give the video a like. Leave me a comment, question, or concern. Let me know what you agreed with that I shared and what you didn't agree with. And if you want to see more from me in the future, then subscribe. Stay sweet.